So in this video, I'm going to show you how to solve quadratic equations by complete the square method. So let's take a quadratic, x squared minus 2x minus 6 equal to 0. Okay? So to complete the square, step 1, move the constant to the other side of the equal side. Okay, so move the constant to the other side of the equal side. So how do I do that? I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So I get x squared minus 2x is equal to 6. Okay? Once I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a blank. All right? I'm going to take a blank here, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So the reason I'm doing this is so I know if I add something on one side, I add it to the other side. Now just hang on with me for a second. So move constant over and put in blanks. Okay? So step 2. Make a equal to 1. Now what is a? Well, what are we talking about? Ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. I want the number in front, the leading coefficient here for in front of the x squared. I want that to be 1. Well, guess what? It's already 1 for this example. So we're already good to go. X squared minus 2x and then plus blank equals 6 and then plus blank. Now say it was like, this wasn't already understood to be 1, maybe it was like a 3. How would you make it 1? Well, I'd divide everything by 3. Okay, and then I would go from there. But we don't have to worry about that because it was just a 1 already. All right, so step 2 is make a 1. So step 3 is I'm going to take the b term, that middle term, okay? Take the b term, and I'm going to half it, and then I'm going to square it. Okay? So b here was equal to -2. That was the b term. So if I half -2, I get -1. And if I square -1, I get +1. Okay? Now, what do I do with this number? This is the number that I put in my blanks. All right? So what do I have? I have x squared minus 2x plus blank equals 6 plus blank. What goes in the blank? The 1 goes in the blank there. Okay? Now, what's so important about this? All right, why do we call it complete the square? Because now we can actually factor this left side into a perfect square. 6 and 1 makes 7, right? Good. Okay. This side right here, this factors. Trinomial t-chart, multiply to 1, add to -2. 1 times 1 is 2. -1 times -1 is still 1, and that adds to -2. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. So this is x squared minus x plus 1. If I GCF this, I can pull an x out and I have x minus 1, and then I can pull a minus 1 out and I have a x minus 1 here. So I have x minus 1 times x minus 1. Now another way to write x minus 1 times x minus 1 is x minus 1 squared, okay, is equal to 7. All right? Now, why is this useful at this point? Well, at this point in my complete the square, I can use the square root method. So if I use a square root method, I'll take the square root of both sides. I get the plus or minus square root of 7 is equal to x minus 1. So that tells me x minus 1 equals the square root of 7, or x minus 1 equals the negative square root of 7. That plus or minus going on right there. So that means x equals 1 plus the square root of 7, or x equals 1 minus the square root of 7. And that, my friends, is your answer. The cool thing about completing the square is completing the square method works with every quadratic that you would run into. Okay? So we can always complete the square and then go from there. Now, sometimes your answer, you might have two different answers like you did here, or you might just have one answer and it's a copy of itself, like x equals 1 comma x equals 1, right? Or you might have no real answers, but you have imaginary solutions, kind of like in this problem here where we had imaginary solutions, okay? So let's try one more where the a is actually not just 1, and that way you can see it, what to do in that scenario. So 4x squared minus 4x minus 63 equal to 0. So step 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my constant over. So I'm going to add 63 to both sides. And I'm drawing my blanks. So I get what? I get 4x squared minus 4x and then plus my blank equals 63 plus my blank. The blank is only there to help you remember that something's supposed to go there. And then whatever that something is completes our square. But before we can complete the square, we got to have a equal to 1. So to do that, to get a equal to 1, I'm going to divide everything through by 4. Okay? So if I do that, I get x squared minus x plus something equals 63 over 4 plus something. Okay? So now that a is 1, right? So now that a is 1, I can look at the b term. Ooh, right? So the b term is negative 1. I'm going to half it. So I'm going to take negative 1 and I'm going to half it. So that's negative a half. And then I square it. Negative 1/2 squared equals negative 1/2 times negative 1/2, which is positive 1/4. This is what goes up in my parentheses here. Okay? And so what do I have? I have x squared minus x and then plus 1/4. Remember the 1/4 right there and right there, right? Equals 63 over 4 plus 1/4. Okay? Now, this side right here might be a little challenging to factor. But one trick that I want to help you out with is this, okay? So without even doing anything, I know right off the bat that this factors to x minus 1/2 squared. Now, how do I know that it factors to this? How might you draw a conclusion here? Well, let's look at this. Do we see negative 1/2 anywhere? Yeah, I think we do, don't we? Right here, whenever I half the b term, I had that negative 1/2 right there, didn't I? That negative 1/2 pops up right here. And if you don't believe me, go back and look at the problem we just did, right? So the problem we just did, what was the first thing I did? I halved the b term and I got negative 1. Where did that negative 1 pop back up again? It popped back up in the parentheses. So as soon as you half it, that's what goes in the parentheses, right? The squaring it, that's what goes into the blanks. Okay, so both of those things have information in it that are useful to us, okay? So when you half it, whatever you half goes into the parentheses, and when you square it, whatever you square goes into your blankety blanks, okay? So I knew right off the bat that this was going to factor to that. And if you multiply this out, you would see that you would get x squared minus 1/2 x minus 1/2 x and then plus 1/4. And so this gets me negative x. And that gets me the x squared and the plus 1/4. So that works, right? See how that works there? Okay. So, and if I add those two together, I get 64 over 4, which happens to be, I guess, 16. So that would be 16. Okay, now what do? Well, to get rid of the square root, or the square, I take the square root, and so I have a plus or minus square root of 16. Square root of 16 is 4. And so this is x minus a half equals plus or minus 4. So x equals, x minus 1/2 equals 4, or x minus 1/2 equals negative 4. So that means x equals 4.5 or 4.5, or x equals negative 3.5, okay? Or negative 3.5. So in fraction form, 4.5, that's 9 over 2. And negative 3.5, that's negative 7 over 2. Okay, so my solutions, my solution set is negative 7 over 2, comma 9 over 2. Close up my solution set. Okay? So hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of what to do here. All right? So step by step, going through completing the square. All right, guys.